A human child prophet crash lands into brutal theocracy. 12-year-old Jake Ramos gaped out the starship porthole at the alien cityscape below, his heart pounding with equal parts fear and awe. Towering chrome spires pierced the amber sky, glinting beneath the crimson rays of a dying sun. Jake had been chosen as humanity's youngest ambassador, selected for the Interstellar Cultural Exchange Program, to represent Earth on Daxam, homeworld of the galaxy's oldest civilization. The ship jolted as it docked at the floating sky temple. A chime sounded and the hatch hissed open, revealing a delegation of gray-robed Daxamite priests, their bulbous eyes unblinking. High Priest Cygnus stepped forward, his withered hands outstretched in reverence. "Behold," he called to the gathered acolytes, "the celestial child of prophecy, the human boy god foretold in the scriptures." Jake fought rising panic as the aliens fell to their knees, foreheads pressed to the ornate floor. This was no ordinary diplomatic mission. Ancient Daxamite prophecies spoke of a human child who would descend from the heavens, a divine savior destined to lead the planet into a new age of enlightenment. And now this superstitious alien society believed Jake was that messiah. The young prophet was quickly sequestered in the opulent temple, a soaring monument of fossil ivory and textured biosilicon. His every whim and desire was to be fulfilled by a battalion of robed attendants. "You must remain here in the sanctum," High Priest Cygnus insisted as Jake marveled at the arcane tech and alien curios adorning his quarters. "The Daxamite people cannot survive direct exposure to your divine radiance. Not yet." Days turned to weeks in the labyrinthine temple. Jake had every luxury, every delicacy, every diversion at his fingertips. But beyond those gilded walls lurked an oppressed world, languishing in ignorance and squalor. The priest wielded Jake's deified status like a cudgel, beating back dissent, keeping the populace servile with the promise of an imminent cosmic deliverance. Whispers reached even Jake's cloistered ears, whispers of a resistance stirring in the neon-bathed back alleys, of riots put down with shock lashes and psi pulses, of a world ready to shatter its chains. The priests thought they could keep their god bottled up like a genie, a talisman to wave before the masses. But this celestial child would not be controlled. This boy prophet would lead a revolution. Humanity had not come to Daxam to be worshipped. They had come to set this world free. Restlessness gnawed at Jake as he paced the confines of his lavish quarters, the once wondrous alien artifacts now seeming more like gilded bars of a cage. The whispered tales of unrest and injustice beyond the temple walls echoed in his mind, stoking a growing sense of unease. He couldn't just sit idly by, a pampered prisoner, while the Daxamite people suffered. Donning a nondescript hooded robe, Jake slipped out of the temple under cover of the planet's emerald night. The city streets teemed with exotic life, tentacled vendors hawking bioluminescent fruits, hover rickshaws weaving between churning industrial walkers, and chittering insectoid laborers scurrying to and fro. But beneath the chaotic vibrancy, Jake sensed an undercurrent of despair. Turning down a narrow alley, he stumbled upon a scene that made his blood boil. A burly temple guard loomed over a cowering Daxamite girl, his shock baton crackling menacingly. "Please, I've done nothing wrong," the girl pleaded, her bulbous eyes wide with terror. "Silence, worm," the guard snarled, raising his weapon. "You dare question the will of the divine?" "Stop!" Jake shouted, his voice cracking with equal parts fear and outrage. He stepped forward, fixing the guard with a defiant glare. "Let her go." The guard whirled around, shock quickly morphing into disdain as he took in Jake's slight frame. "Mind your own business, brat," he spat, "or you'll get a taste of the baton, too." But as he spoke, recognition dawned in the guard's eyes. The robe's hood had slipped back, revealing Jake's human features. You're the celestial child," he stammered, slowly lowering his weapon. "Forgive me, Holy One. I didn't realize." "You're forgiven," Jake said firmly, emboldened by the guard's reaction. "Now leave her be." The guard backed away, muttering half-hearted apologies and excuses before hastily retreating down the alley. The girl, still trembling, looked up at Jake with a mixture of awe and confusion. "Thank you," she said softly, dusting herself off. "That was very brave of you. I'm Zara, by the way." Jake smiled, offering her a hand up. I'm Jake, and I'm not brave, just sick of seeing people bullied and oppressed. Zara cocked her head curiously. But you're the celestial child, the divine savior. Don't you believe in the prophecy? Jake hesitated, glancing around to make sure they were alone. Can you keep a secret, Zara? I'm not sure what I believe anymore. All I know is that something isn't right here, and I want to understand the truth. Zara's eyes widened with a mixture of surprise and excitement. You're not the only one, she whispered conspiratorially. There are others who doubt the priest's words, who believe the prophecy has been twisted for their own gain. Jake felt a thrill of connection, of shared purpose. I want to know more, Zara. I want to see the real Daxam, not just the pretty illusions they show me in the temple. Zara glanced around nervously, then leaned in close. Meet me here again tomorrow night, she breathed. I can show you things, introduce you to people. But you must be careful. If the priests find out, there will be consequences for us both. Jake nodded solemnly, his heart racing with anticipation and a hint of fear. I'll be here. Together, maybe we can find a way to make things right. As he slipped back into the temple, Jake's mind reeled with the implications of his clandestine meeting. The world he thought he knew was crumbling around him, replaced by something far more complex and troubling. But now, for the first time since arriving on Daxam, he felt a sense of purpose, of destiny that extended beyond empty worship and hollow prophecies. The days crawled by, each moment stretching into an eternity as Jake played the role of the obedient deity, all while his nights were filled with secret rendezvous and eye-opening revelations. Zara introduced him to a hidden network of rebels and freethinkers, Daxamites from all walks of life united by their desire for truth and justice. They met in the forgotten spaces of the city, abandoned factories, sewage tunnels, derelict temples, sharing ancient texts and forbidden histories that painted a very different picture of Daxam's past and the prophecy's true meaning. The more Jake learned, the more his anger and commitment grew. The priests were using him, using the people's faith, to maintain their iron grip on power. But the young prophet's illicit activities did not go unnoticed. High Priest Cygnus watched with growing concern as Jake grew more distant and defiant, his questions sharper, his gaze more challenging. And there were whispers of the human boy being seen in the company of known dissidents and troublemakers. Dark tidings, Cygnus mused. Left unchecked, this budding rebellion could unravel generations of careful control, undermining the very foundations of the theocracy. The celestial child was the linchpin of their power. If he turned against them, it could be the spark that ignited a revolution. The high priest summoned his most loyal and feared enforcer, a grizzled temple guard named Zivok. The human whelp grows insolent, Cygnus hissed, his tone laden with venom. He consorts with heretics and malcontents, poisoning the prophecy with his doubts. This cannot be allowed to continue. Zivok nodded grimly, fingering the well-worn shock baton at his side. What would you have me do, Your Eminence? A cold smile slithered across Cygnus's withered lips. Watch him, follow his every move, and should he stray too far from the path of righteousness, should he threaten the divine order, eliminate the problem, permanently. As Zavok melted into the shadows to begin his grim task, Jake and Zara huddled in a dank, musty cellar, poring over a tattered, ancient scroll by the flickering light of a biolantern. The faded text spoke of cycles of oppression and rebellion, of prophets and charlatans, and of a final reckoning where the truth would be laid bare. Don't you see, Jake? Zara whispered urgently, her eyes gleaming with fervor. You're not here to be worshipped or obeyed. You're here to break the cycle, to set us free. Jake felt the weight of destiny settling on his narrow shoulders, a burden far heavier than any crown or halo. He thought of the suffering and injustice he had witnessed, the lies and manipulations of the priests, and he knew with a deep and unshakable certainty that he could no longer be a pawn in their game. You're right, Zara, he said softly, his voice echoing with quiet perseverance in the close confines of the cellar. It's time for the truth to come to light. It's time for the Daxamite people to reclaim their destiny, and I'll do whatever it takes to make that happen. But even as the words left his lips, Jake couldn't shake the prickling sense of unease. the feeling of unseen eyes watching from the darkness. The road ahead would be perilous, the enemies arrayed against them formidable and ruthless. The young prophet and his newfound allies were playing a dangerous game, and the stakes could not be higher. For in the gilded halls of the temple, behind the impassive masks of the priests, a storm was gathering, a tempest of fear, fanaticism, and desperate brutality that threatened to sweep away all who stood in its path. The battle for Daxam's soul had begun, and Jake Ramos, the celestial child, the reluctant Messiah, stood at its center, a small, fragile figure upon whom the fate of worlds now rested. Jake's clandestine meetings with Zara and the rebels continued, each rendezvous revealing more about Daxam's true history. As they huddled in dimly lit chambers, poring over ancient texts, Jake felt a growing unease. The weight of his supposed divinity pressed down on him, at odds with the mounting evidence of the priest's deception. One muggy evening, Jake and Zara slipped through winding alleys to meet with Talon, the charismatic rebel leader. In a cavernous underground chamber, Jake's eyes widened as he took in the gathering of diverse Daxamites, laborers, scholars, even a few lower-ranking temple acolytes. Talon, a tall figure with piercing green eyes, gestured to a weathered scroll. "This, friends, is the true prophecy," he declared, "not the twisted version fed to us by the priests." As Talon read, Jake's heart raced. The words spoke not of a divine savior, but of the potential within all beings to bring about change. The celestial child was a metaphor, not a messianic figure. "It can't be," Jake whispered to Zara. "Everything they told me, it was all a lie?" Zara squeezed his hand. "You're not alone in this, Jake. We'll find the truth together." Unbeknownst to them, Zivok lurked in the shadows, his eyes narrowing as he recorded every treasonous word. In the following days, Jake threw himself into research, sneaking into the temple archives under the guise of divine contemplation. He and Zara carefully transcribed an ancient codex, its faded glyphs telling a very different story than the one Jake had been taught. As the final pieces fell into place, Jake felt a mixture of relief and anger. "We have to tell everyone," he insisted to Zara. "The people deserve to know." At their next rebel meeting, Jake shared his findings. The chamber buzzed with excitement and outrage. Talon's eyes gleamed as he proposed a public rally to expose the priest's lies. But their plans were shattered in an instant. The chamber door burst open, temple guards flooding in with shock batons crackling. Chaos erupted as rebels scattered, fought, or were dragged away in restraints. "Jake, run!" Zara shouted, grabbing his arm and pulling him towards a hidden exit. They sprinted through twisting tunnels, the shouts of guards echoing behind them. Emerging into the neon-lit streets, they didn't stop running until they reached a dingy safe house on the city's outskirts. As they caught their breath, the reality of their situation sank in. "We're fugitives now," Zara said grimly. Before Jake could respond, a public holobroadcast flickered to life on a nearby wall. High Priest Cygnus's wizened face filled the screen, his eyes burning with righteous fury. "Citizens of Daxam," he intoned, "be warned. The one we thought to be the celestial child is a fraud, a dangerous heretic bent on undermining our sacred traditions. Do not be deceived by his lies. Report any sightings to the temple guards immediately." Jake's stomach churned as his own face appeared on the screen, labeled "Wanted" in glaring red letters. "What do we do now?" he asked Zara, his voice barely above a whisper. She met his gaze, purpose etched in every line of her face. "We keep fighting. We find a way to get the truth out, no matter what it takes." As sirens wailed in the distance and the city pulsed with nervous energy, Jake knew their real struggle had only just begun. The priest's iron grip on Daxam would not be easily broken, but armed with the truth in each other, they had to try. Jake and Zara pressed on through the night, the cityscape fading behind them as they ventured into the rugged wilderness beyond. Exhaustion clawed at their limbs, but fear of capture drove them forward. As dawn broke, they crested a hill to find a hidden valley nestled between towering cliffs. "There," Zara pointed, indicating a cluster of structures camouflaged against the rocky terrain. They approached cautiously, hands raised in a gesture of peace as figures emerged from concealed positions. A tall woman with close-cropped silver hair stepped forward, her piercing gaze appraising them. "I am Tara," she said, her voice carrying the weight of command. "We've been expecting you." Jake blinked in surprise. "You have?" Tara nodded, gesturing for them to follow. "Word travels fast in the underground. Come, you'll be safe here." The rebel camp bustled with activity. Jake marveled at the diverse array of Daxamites working together. Laborers and scholars, young and old, united in purpose. Tara led them to a central meeting area where a holographic map of the capital flickered to life. "We can protect you here," Tara explained, "but hiding isn't enough. The priest's lies have enslaved our people for too long. It's time to act." Jake's throat tightened. "What can we do? They control everything." Tara's eyes gleamed. "Not everything. For years, we've been gathering evidence, decoding the true prophecy. Your discovery was the final piece we needed." She activated another hologram, displaying ancient Daxamite text alongside modern translations. "See here? The mistranslation is blatant once you know where to look. We can prove the priests twisted the words for their own gain." Zara leaned in, studying the glyphs. "This changes everything." "Exactly," Tara said. "And now we have a plan to let all of Daxam know the truth." Over the next days, Jake and Zara integrated into the rebel community, learning their ways and contributing their knowledge. Tara outlined a daring strategy to hijack the temple's communication network and broadcast the true prophecy across the planet. As the appointed hour neared, tension thrummed through the camp. Jake paced nervously, rehearsing the words he would say to his adopted people. Zara found him, placing a steadying hand on his shoulder. "You can do this," she said softly. "They need to hear it from you." Jake nodded, squaring his shoulders. "Let's go change the world." They moved under cover of darkness, rebel teams slipping into the city through hidden tunnels and secret passages. Jake's heart raced as they infiltrated the sprawling temple complex, disabling security systems with inside knowledge from sympathetic acolytes. In the central broadcast chamber, fingers flew over control panels, overriding the priest's iron grip on information. Tara stepped before the cameras, her voice ringing out across Daxam. "Citizens, you have been deceived," she began, laying out the evidence of the priest's corruption. When it was Jake's turn, he swallowed hard, looking directly into the lens. "I am not the celestial child," he said, his voice gaining strength. "I'm just a boy from Earth, used as a pawn in the priest's game. But together, we can forge a new future for Daxam, one of truth and justice." As the broadcast concluded, they braced for the inevitable backlash. It came swiftly, Cygnus's outraged face filling screens across the city, denouncing them as heretics and alien infiltrators. But it was too late. The truth had taken root. Reports flooded in of protests erupting in city squares, citizens clashing with temple guards. Jake watched in awe as the fervor spread, a tide of change sweeping across Daxam. Tara's voice cut through the chaos. "This is only the beginning," she said grimly. "Cygnus won't give up without a fight. We need to strike while we have momentum." She outlined the next phase, a daring assault on the temple itself. Jake felt a mix of fear and purpose as he realized his role in the coming confrontation. The time had come to face Cygnus and break the chains of false prophecy once and for all. As they prepared for the final push, Jake caught Zara's eye. No words were needed. Their shared nod spoke volumes. Whatever came next, they would face it together, for the future of Daxam. The rebel assault on the temple unfolded with swift precision. Jake's heart pounded as he raced through opulent corridors alongside Zara and Tara, their footsteps echoing off marble floors. The air crackled with energy weapons and the shouts of both rebels and temple guards. They burst into the high priest's inner sanctum to find Cygnus cowering behind a gilded desk. Jake stepped forward, voice steady. "It's over, Cygnus. The people know the truth now." The old man's eyes blazed with defiance, but he offered no resistance as Tara's rebels secured him. Outside, the sounds of fighting died away, replaced by triumphant cheers echoing across the city. In the days that followed, Jake found himself thrust into a whirlwind of activity. The temple's vast halls, once a symbol of oppression, became the epicenter of a new era. Tara wasted no time in convening a constitutional convention, gathering representatives from all walks of Daxamite life. Jake sat in on endless debates, his Earthborn perspective offering unique insights. "We need to guarantee individual freedoms," he insisted during one heated session, "and completely dismantle the caste system. No more privileged elites lording over everyone else." Tara nodded approvingly. "Well said. And who better to oversee this transition than you, Jake?" He blinked, caught off guard. "Me? But I'm not even Daxamite." "You're the bridge between our worlds now," Tara said. "The people trust you. We need a steady hand to guide us until we're ready for true elections." Zara squeezed his arm. "You can do this, Jake. We'll be right there with you." Reluctantly, Jake accepted the role of interim leader. His first acts were bold, dissolving the priestly authority, releasing political prisoners, and opening the temple's vast libraries to the public. But the path to reform was not without obstacles. Reports of unrest trickled in from the outer provinces. Jake pored over security briefings, his stomach churning. "Zivok," he muttered, recognizing the ex-enforcer's tactics. "He's rallying the hardliners." Tara's expression hardened. "We can't let them undo everything we've fought for." Jake nodded grimly. "Impose martial law if we have to, but only temporarily. We're not becoming the very thing we overthrew." As the months passed, Jake found himself shouldering ever greater responsibilities. He worked tirelessly, drafting laws to ensure equality, meeting with human diplomats, and overseeing the dismantling of centuries-old systems of oppression. One evening, exhausted from another marathon policy session, Jake retreated to a quiet balcony overlooking the sprawling capital. Zara joined him, her presence a balm to his frayed nerves. "Look at that," she said softly, gesturing to the bustling streets below. "New schools opening, commoners starting businesses. None of this would have been possible before." Jake smiled, allowing himself a moment of pride. "We're getting there, but there's still so much to do." Zara turned to face him, her eyes shining in the fading light. "We'll do it together," she said, closing the distance between them. Their kiss was tender, a promise of shared purpose and deepening affection. As the first free elections approached, Jake found himself at a crossroads. Daxamites from all walks of life urged him to run for permanent leadership. The pressure was immense, but Jake knew in his heart what he had to do. In a packed assembly hall, Jake took the podium. "My fellow Daxamites," he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the planet via holographic broadcast. "I came to your world as an outsider, caught up in a web of lies and manipulation. But together, we broke free from those chains. Now it's time for Daxam to chart its own course." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I will not be running in the upcoming election. My role was always meant to be temporary. Instead, I wholeheartedly endorse Tara as the candidate best suited to lead Daxam into this new era." The hall erupted in a mix of surprised murmurs and supportive cheers. Jake caught Tara's eye, seeing the commitment there. He knew Daxam would be in capable hands. As he stepped down from the podium, Jake felt a weight lift from his shoulders. There was still much work to be done, but for the first time since arriving on this alien world, he felt truly hopeful about the future. Daxam was on the path to true democracy, and Jake Ramos, the boy from Earth, had played his part in making it happen. 5 years after Tara's historic election victory, Jake Ramos stood at the podium in Daxam's gleaming Capitol building. The chamber buzzed with anticipation as he prepared to unveil the Human Integration Initiative. "Honored representatives," Jake began, his voice steady. "Today marks a new chapter in Daxam's history. We propose granting limited citizenship to human immigrants, fostering cultural exchange, and strengthening the bonds between our worlds." Applause erupted from the progressive faction, while others sat in stony silence. Jake caught Zara's eye in the crowd, drawing strength from her encouraging nod. As Jake exited the chamber, a towering Daxamite blocked his path. Razar, the opposition leader, fixed Jake with a cold stare. "You may have fooled them, Ramos," Razar growled, "but I see through your charade. This integration is nothing but a ploy for human domination." Jake met his gaze unflinchingly. We're building bridges, not conquering armies. Give it a chance, Roxar. The debate raged across Daxam for months. Jake threw himself into public forums and media appearances, championing the cause of integration. But for every mind he changed, Roxar's fiery rhetoric swayed another. President Tara summoned Jake to her office, her face etched with concern. "The situation's volatile," she said, pacing. "I'm proposing stricter assimilation requirements for human applicants. It's not ideal, but it might calm the opposition." Jake's face hardened, but he nodded reluctantly. "If it gets the program off the ground, I'll endorse it." The compromise seemed to work, until Marcus Brill stepped onto Daxam's soil. The brash humans integration hearing quickly devolved into chaos. "I won't bow to oppressive traditions," Brill shouted, his words beamed across the planet. "Daxam needs to evolve, not force us into your outdated mold." Jake watched the broadcast, his stomach sinking. Brill's outburst played directly into Roxar's hands. Within days, protests erupted in major cities. Roxar's supporters clashed with pro-integration demonstrators, pushing Daxam to the brink of chaos. Tara's hologram flickered to life in Jake's office. "This ends now," she said, her voice steely. "I'm setting up a debate between you and Roxar. You're our best hope to defuse this powder keg." The night of the debate, Jake paced backstage, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He stepped into the spotlight, facing Roxar across a sleek stage. "You claim to champion Daxam," Jake said, his words echoing across millions of screens. "But true strength comes from unity, not isolation. I've walked in both worlds. Humans and Daxamites have more in common than you realize." For 2 grueling hours, they sparred over policy and principle. Jake drew on every ounce of his diplomatic experience, countering Roxar's charged rhetoric with reasoned arguments and personal anecdotes. As the debate concluded, a fragile calm settled over Daxam. In a gesture of reconciliation, Brill's application was approved, but with additional cultural sensitivity training. Jake allowed himself a moment of hope. Perhaps the worst was behind them. That illusion shattered 3 days later. Jake was touring a newly opened integration center with Zara and their infant daughter, Lyra. The first explosion rocked the building's foundation. Alarms blared as smoke filled the corridors. "This way!" Jake shouted, cradling Lyra as he and Zara raced for the exit. A second blast knocked them off their feet. Trapped in a stairwell, Jake heard the distinctive whine of energy weapons. A firefight erupted outside. "Jake Ramos," a gruff voice called. "This is Captain Drell, Human Security Force. We're here to extract you." Jake hesitated, then made a split-second decision. "We're coming out!" They emerged into chaos. Human security officers in sleek armor provided covering fire as Jake and his family sprinted for an armored transport. As they sped away, Jake watched pillars of smoke rise over the city. His comm unit crackled with reports of coordinated attacks across Daxam. He held Zara and Lyra close, his mind racing. The extremists had made their move. Now it was time for Jake to make his. Jake's mind raced as the armored transport weaved through Daxam's chaotic streets. Smoke billowed from burning buildings, and the air crackled with energy weapon fire. He clutched Zara and Lyra close, his mind focused. "We need to address the people," Jake said, his voice hoarse. "Now!" Captain Drell nodded grimly. "I'll patch you through to the emergency broadcast network." Moments later, Jake's face appeared on screens across Daxam. He spoke with calm urgency. "Citizens of Daxam, this is Jake Ramos. The attacks we've witnessed today are an assault on everything we've built together, but we will not be divided by fear and hatred." As Jake's words reached millions, the tide of public opinion began to shift. Calls for action flooded social media channels and government comm lines. President Tara seized the moment, authorizing the formation of special counterterrorism units. Over the next week, Jake worked tirelessly alongside Daxamite security forces, providing insights into human tactics and technology. Raids swept across the planet, targeting suspected extremist cells. The efficiency of the operations was unprecedented, catching many off guard. In a shocking turn of events, Roxar himself was arrested during a high-profile raid. Jake watched the footage, a mix of emotions churning in his gut as the opposition leader was led away in restraints. But the swift crackdown came at a cost. Reports of civil liberties violations began to surface. Jake's comm unit buzzed constantly with urgent messages from human rights activists and moderate Daxamite politicians. "This isn't what we fought for," Zara said, her eyes filled with concern as they watched protesters gather in the streets below their apartment. Jake nodded, his expression grim. "You're right, we need to find a balance." He arranged an emergency meeting with President Tara. The usually composed leader looked haggard, the strain of recent events evident on her face. "The situation is spiraling, Jake," Tara said, pacing her office. "I need your help to bridge this divide." Jake took a deep breath. "I'll do what I can, but we need to address the root causes, not just symptoms." Over the next days, Jake threw himself into a whirlwind of negotiations. He met with protest leaders, listened to their grievances, and worked to secure the release of those wrongfully detained. His reputation as a neutral party proved invaluable in opening lines of communication. The turning point came during a tense summit broadcast live across Daxam. Jake stood at the center of the Grand Assembly Hall, flanked by representatives from all factions. "We stand at a crossroads," Jake began, his voice steady. "The path forward isn't about human versus Daxamite or tradition versus progress. It's about finding common ground and building a society that honors the best of both worlds." As Jake spoke, he noticed a shift in the room. Even hardliners leaned forward, listening intently. He outlined a vision of Daxam that embraced diversity while respecting cultural heritage, that valued security without sacrificing liberty. The negotiations stretched on for hours, but progress was made. Rassar was granted conditional release, agreeing to publicly denounce extremism. Key protest leaders were freed, and new safeguards for civil liberties were put in place. Not everyone was satisfied. Jake faced criticism from both sides, accused of betraying human interests and capitulating to traditionalists. But he pressed on, convinced that this middle ground was the only way forward. Weeks later, Jake stood beside Raxar on a stage overlooking a massive crowd. The unlikely allies unveiled their joint anti-extremism initiative, focusing on education and cultural exchange. As they spoke, Jake sensed a shift in the energy of the crowd, a cautious hope replacing the anger and fear of recent months. This is just the beginning, Jake thought, scanning the sea of faces below. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time since the attacks, he felt a glimmer of optimism for Daxam's future. Jake's optimism proved short-lived. As he and Rassar descended from the stage, a deafening explosion rocked the square. Screams erupted from the panicked crowd as smoke billowed from a nearby building. "Get down!" Jake shouted, tackling Raxar to the ground as debris rained around them. Security forces swarmed the area, ushering Jake and Rassar to an armored transport. Jake's comm unit crackled to life with urgent reports. "Multiple attacks across the city," a grim-faced officer informed them. "Targeting progressive leaders. We're taking you to a secure location." Jake's heart raced as he thought of Zara and Lyra. He punched in their emergency code, relief washing over him when Zara's hologram appeared. "We're safe," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. The force field activated just in time. Over the following days, the full scope of Vorak's campaign became clear. The former lieutenant of Raxar had rejected the path of moderation, leading a hardline faction determined to derail human Daxamite integration at any cost. President Tara addressed the nation, her hologram projected in every major city. "We will not bow to terror," she declared, her voice unwavering. "Our commitment to progress and unity remains unshaken." Jake threw himself into damage control, working alongside Raxar to counter Vorak's narrative. They appeared on news broadcasts, visited hospitals, and met with community leaders to reassure a shaken populace. During a late-night strategy session, Rassar's face twisted with guilt. "I should have seen this coming," he said, slumping in his chair. "Vorak always was the true believer." Jake clasped his shoulder. "You chose a better path. That's what matters now." Their efforts seemed to be working until Vorak launched his most insidious attack yet. Footage of Jake's arrival on Daxam years ago began circulating, interspersed with ominous narration. The so-called savior, Vorek's voice sneered over images of cheering crowds. Engineered our downfall from the start. The prophesied child seeks not liberation, but subjugation. Jake watched the broadcast, his fists clenched. We need to get ahead of this, he told Tara. Not with denials, but with action. He outlined his plan for the Unity Through Understanding program. Tara listened intently, her brow furrowed. It's risky, she said finally, but you're right. We can't let fear dictate our future. The first integrated communities took root in carefully selected villages. Jake spent weeks shuttling between them, overseeing cultural exchanges and mediating conflicts. In a small Daxamite farming community, he watched human agronomists demonstrate earth irrigation techniques to fascinated locals. Nearby, a group of human children listened wide-eyed as an elder recounted ancient Daxamite legends. Jake allowed himself a moment of pride, but it was short-lived. Vorek's response was swift and brutal. The night sky blazed orange as Jake's transport raced towards the nearest integration village. Plumes of smoke rose ominously in the distance. No, Jake whispered, his heart sinking as they crested a hill. The village below was in chaos, buildings aflame as terrified residents fled. Jake leapt from the vehicle before it fully stopped, racing towards a group of human and Daxamite children huddled together. He scooped up a crying Daxamite girl, shouting instructions to his security team. As they evacuated the village, Jake's comm unit buzzed incessantly. Similar attacks were unfolding across the planet. But something unexpected happened in the days that followed. Instead of cowering in fear, Daxamites and humans alike rallied around the integration communities. Footage of the attacks galvanized public opinion, turning decisively against Vorek's extremists. Rasar led the charge, his impassioned speeches drawing massive crowds. We cannot let the actions of a hateful few define us, he declared, his voice ringing out across packed squares. Daxam's future lies in unity, not division. Jake watched from the sidelines, a mix of pride and purpose surging through him. The tide was turning, but the real work was just beginning. 18 years passed in the blink of an eye. Jake stood at the spaceport, watching his daughter Kira's excited face as she gazed at the sleek interstellar shuttle that would take them to Earth. I can't believe it's finally happening, Kira said, her eyes shining. Her features were a perfect blend of human and Daxamite, a living symbol of the integration Jake had fought so hard to achieve. Zara squeezed Jake's hand. She's ready for this, she whispered, though Jake detected a hint of worry in her voice. The journey to Earth was uneventful, but Jake's mind raced with memories. As they descended through Earth's atmosphere, he pointed out landmarks to Kira, relishing her wonder at the planet of her father's birth. The first weeks at the university were a whirlwind of orientation sessions and cultural immersion programs. Jake and Zara stayed nearby, helping Kira acclimate while reconnecting with old friends and colleagues. One evening, as they walked across the sprawling campus, Jake noticed a group of students eyeing Kira with barely concealed hostility. He quickened his pace, steering his family towards their apartment. Dad, did you see those people? Kira asked, her brow furrowed. Jake nodded grimly. Not everyone shares our vision of unity, Kira. Be careful. The warning proved tragically prescient. 3 weeks into the semester, Jake's comm unit erupted with alarms. He sprinted across campus, his heart pounding as he saw smoke rising from the science building. Zara's scream cut through the chaos. Jake found her crumpled near the entrance, a nasty plasma burn on her side. They took her, she gasped, clutching Jake's arm. The children of Terra. Jake's world narrowed to a pinpoint of focused rage. As medical teams swarmed around Zara, he barked orders into his comm unit, mobilizing every contact he had on Earth and Daxam. Within hours, President Tara's hologram flickered to life in Jake's makeshift command center. We stand with you, Jake, she said, her face etched with concern. Our best operatives are en route. Rasar arrived personally, his once fiery rhetoric now tempered by years of statesmanship. We'll find her, he assured Jake, gripping his shoulder. Days blurred together as Jake pored over ransom demands and intelligence reports. He barely slept, his mind consumed with images of Kira in danger. A breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A former Daxamite separatist, now working in Kuiper Belt mining operations, recognized one of the masked figures in the ransom video. "I've seen him before," the grizzled miner said via hologram. "He runs with a crew out of Asteroid X9. Jake's team sprang into action. Stealth shuttles sliced through the inky void of the outer solar system, converging on the desolate rock. The battle was swift and brutal. Jake led the charge, his rage focused to a laser point as he cut through the Children of Terra's defenses. In the asteroid's control center, Jake found Kira strapped to a chair, a camera trained on her terrified face. The group's leader, a wild-eyed man with a shock of white hair, held a plasma pistol to her head. "You're too late, Ramos," he snarled. "The galaxy will see the truth about your mongrel spawn." Jake's hand moved faster than thought, his own weapon discharged, the leader crumpling to the ground. As Jake rushed to free Kira, Rassar's voice boomed through the compound's speakers. The elder statesman's words rang with passion and conviction, denouncing the extremists and reaffirming the promise of a united future. Jake held Kira close, feeling her sob against his chest. He knew the battle was not nearly finished, but in that moment, all that mattered was that his daughter was safe. Jake cradled Kira as their shuttle broke Daxam's atmosphere. The planet's swirling clouds concealed the turmoil below, but Jake sensed the growing unrest. Kira's eyes were haunted, her fingers tracing the outline of her Daxamite markings. "We're home," Jake said softly, though the words felt hollow. The spaceport bustled with activity, but Jake noted the undercurrent of tension. Daxamites eyed the human arrivals with suspicion, conversations hushing as they passed. A news hologram flickered nearby, showcasing dueling protests in the capital. "The Children of Terra crisis has reignited separatist fervor," Roxar's hologram explained, his face creased with worry. "President Tara's coalition is fracturing." Jake's comm unit buzzed with urgent messages. He skimmed them as they walked, his frown deepening. "Emergency elections," he muttered. "This isn't good." Over the following weeks, Jake threw himself into damage control. He shuttled between rural communities and urban centers, pleading for unity. In a packed town square, he faced a sea of skeptical faces. "Integration has brought us peace," Jake argued, his voice hoarse from countless speeches. "We can't throw that away." A burly Daxamite farmer pushed to the front. "Easy for you to say," he spat. "While we struggle, the elites prosper. Where's our piece of this united future?" Jake opened his mouth to respond, but the crowd's grumbling drowned him out. He caught sight of posters bearing the stern visage of Draven, the words "Alien Out" emblazoned below. Election day arrived with a palpable tension in the air. Jake paced Tara's command center, watching as holographic projections tracked the voting results. District after district flashed red, signaling Draven's victories. "It can't be," Tara whispered, her usually composed demeanor cracking. The final tally confirmed their worst fears. Draven had eked out a narrow win, his xenophobic rhetoric resonating with a populace hungry for change. Jake barely had time to process the defeat before Draven's new regime sprang into action. Integration programs were dismantled overnight. Human businesses shuttered, their owners fleeing en masse. "You are no longer welcome here," a grim-faced official informed Jake, handing him a deportation order. Jake's heart raced as he formulated a plan. He couldn't abandon Kira or Zara, but staying openly would only endanger them further. He donned a hooded cloak, slipping into the shadows of Daxam's sprawling capital. From his hidden safe house, Jake watched in horror as Draven's crackdown intensified. Holovids showed mass arrests of integration advocates, branded as traitors. Jake's fists clenched as he recognized faces in the crowds, friends and allies hauled away. A knock at the door startled Jake from his vigil. He reached for his weapon, relaxing only when he heard Razar's familiar voice. The elder statesman looked haggard, his eyes sunken. "It's worse than we feared," Rassar said, collapsing into a chair. "Splinter militias are forming. They're calling for the expulsion of all hybrids." Jake's blood ran cold. "Kira," he breathed. Before they could formulate a plan, Jake's comm unit crackled to life. Kira's hologram appeared, her face set with purpose. "I'm going to negotiate with them," she declared. "If I can secure safe passage for the hybrids, Maybe we can avoid bloodshed. Kira, no! Jake protested, but the transmission cut off. Jake and Rassar raced across the city, dodging patrols and navigating back alleys. They arrived at the government complex just in time to see Kira led away in restraints, Draven's triumphant face looming on massive screens. The alien contamination ends now, Draven's amplified voice boomed. Let the execution of this hybrid be the first step in purifying our world. Jake's mind raced. He knew he had only one chance to save his daughter and prevent Daxam from plunging into irreversible darkness.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.